Hello, good morning. I want to welcome you to this introductory course on the principles of fundraising. My goal with this course is to welcome you to Afflux. I'll share effective strategies for fundraising success. Welcome to Afflux, a platform for securing resources. This course complements your Afros license, reflecting your trust in us. With that introduction, let's learn about fundraising from the basics. Some organizations are more advanced, but this course assumes limited experience, allowing us to speak in basic terms. Welcome to Afflux. You have access to a fundraising platform designed to help you secure resources. This course complements your Afros license, showing your trust in us to help your organization succeed. Afros is crucial because technology is essential for large-scale fundraising. While you might get some donations, scaling up to attract many donors requires more. Well, this is part of your welcome to Afflux. Right now, you have access to a platform designed for fundraising. It's a technological platform that allows for many things to help you be successful in securing resources. This course is a complement to the fact that you have acquired the Afros license and in some way have given us that vote of confidence to teach you and help your organizations be more successful. Now, to talk a bit about Afros, why is Afros so important? Because without technology, it's hard to do fundraising at scale. You might receive some donations, but getting fundraising to develop aggressively in your organization, attracting many donors and so on, is a different story. So, to talk about Afros, why is Afros important? Fundraising at scale is hard. Aggressive fundraising, attracting many donors, is different. Without technology, it was recently expensive. Choose a CRM, integrate with website, payment, analytics, etc., and so on. You won't be able to do it without technology. And until very recently, technology for these kinds of situations was quite expensive. You would choose a CRM, integrate it with your website, payment platforms, analytics, and so on, etc. Integrations are often expensive and difficult, especially without internal expertise. Few organizations have this, and setting up can cost thousands. For most, these investments aren't feasible. Afflux democratizes technology, providing access to professional fundraising tools without high costs. Importantly, Afflux is an enabler, a platform for fundraising, but you do the fundraising. To guide fundraising, we created the Afros methodology with 5 stages, dividing the fundraising lifecycle into stages with activities for success. So let's say something very important, perhaps the most important thing, is that Afflux, as a technology, is an enabler. It's a platform that allows you to do fundraising, but it doesn't do the fundraising for you. You do it. So to guide you a bit on how to do fundraising, we created this methodology called Afros. Afros is a methodology that has 5 stages. What this methodology aims to do is to divide the fundraising life cycle into these 5 stages, where according to each stage, there are a series of activities or tasks that you can execute to be successful in the fundraising process. So let's say that in this process, what we're going to do is teach you this methodology so that with the technology that is your enabler and the methodology that is the way you do fundraising, if you put both things together, it can be successful. I want to emphasize this because it's very important. Technology alone doesn't do anything. You can have Afflux, but if you don't do fundraising, you won't be able to succeed. And to do fundraising, you can follow this methodological guide we've prepared for you, which will help you be successful in the process. So before talking about fundraising, I think it's important to keep a few things in mind. First, money does matter. Why is it important? Because organizations with more resources and money are able to have a greater social impact. If you are in a social organization, then your goal in life, your objective as an organization, is to help society in the cause you have chosen, no matter what the cause is. The environment, education, support for the most vulnerable, etc. You seek to create a lot of social impact, and the measure that will determine how much impact you can have is, unfortunately, money. It doesn't matter how much goodwill you have or how much desire you have to do good. If you don't have the resources to generate impact, then your impact will be limited to the resources you have. So what we're trying to help you understand here is that as an organization, it's very important for you to seek funding, because the more money you have, the more good you can do. In one way or another, we're looking for you to have a greater social impact. So in order for you to have resources, it's extremely important that you do fundraising. Fundraising, or fundraising as we call it in Mexico, resource collection, as they say in Brazil, etc., etc. Well, it's very important for your organization to fulfill its mission. Otherwise, it can't exist. In fundraising, a social organization needs a team to secure resources and succeed. For example, I am a car dealership. If I don't have a sales team, I will never be able to sell the cars I need for my company to be successful. The same thing happens in fundraising. I am a social organization. If I don't have a team, people, resources allocated to me, in short, so that I can get more resources to do my work as an organization, then I will not be successful. So having fundraising is extremely important in the strategy of the organization and how fundraising supports the financial sustainability strategy. Many rely on grants, receive annual donations, sometimes get support from the government, and sometimes sell services. Fundraising ensures financial viability. So there are many organizations that have traditionally relied on grants, receive annual donations, sometimes get support from the government, and occasionally sell services. It's very important that fundraising is part of strategy for how I obtain resources to ensure my organization is financially viable. So both things go hand in hand. They aren't separate as such. And there are several types of fundraising. There's one type of fundraising that's institution-oriented, which is the most common in our countries. There's a type of fundraising that's focused on individuals. It's the least common, but it's the biggest opportunity that exists in Colombia and in Latin America in general. From Mexico to Argentina, those are the big opportunities. Fundraising can involve selling services. Commercial models require efficiency. Selling gifts online competes with Amazon. Organizations should do both types of fundraising. Institutional fundraising involves governments, companies, and foundations like Menninger AIDS and Ford. I create an e-commerce site to sell gifts. Well, you're going to compete with Amazon, and you have to be as good as Amazon at selling products at low prices, etc. So the recommendations are that organizations really develop these two sides, the institutional forest, the forging of individuals over institutions, because that is what many organizations already do. Government, companies, foundations like, I don't know, the Menninger AIDS Foundation, the Ford Foundation, etc., etc. Look for an international professor, apply for calls to obtain resources. All of this is very good. Our recommendation is that all of this is done with the understanding that each of these is a different channel, and ideally, there should be someone from your team dedicated to each one. What are the most common mistakes organizations make? They assign the same person to do both things. You should seek funding at the institutional level and funding at the individual level, and they shouldn't do both. The team that works on individual fundraising, whether it's one person or a team, is one team, and the team that does this is another team. Even within these teams, there are significant differences. It's not the same to have someone who focuses on applying for international cooperation calls, where there needs to be a process aimed at structuring projects, as it is to have someone who works on corporate fundraising, looking for partnerships at the company level. The person who seeks partnerships at the corporate level is a PR professional with strong relationship building skills, while the one looking for resources at the international cooperation level is a finance professional who aims to structure projects in the best possible way. So they are different worlds. Each of these should be a channel. And at the individual level, which is where we're going to focus, it's a marketing process aimed at creating a community of people who support my cause. So it's very important to clearly understand those two differences. In this course, we're going to talk about individual giving. AFRIS is not a platform for operational fundraising. AFRIS doesn't aim to be a platform for corporate fundraising. And no, we're not focused on teaching you how to do all these forms of fundraising. We're focused on teaching you how to do fundraising with individuals, which is the great opportunity we see at the international level, especially in Latin America. Okay, so what do we find at the individual level? We found that the reason, more importantly, the key pattern we see at the individual level is that all successful organizations develop this area. There is no successful organization that doesn't have a fundraising area. All large organizations, as well as medium and successful ones, do individual fundraising. There is no reason for you, as a social organization with impact or cause, not to do it. So all the large organizations in the world, without exception, medium-sized and successful, all do individual fundraising. There wouldn't be a reason for you, as a social organization with a social impact, a cause, or some kind of humanitarian work, not to do it. So you should do it, right? On the other hand, there are many that are not as successful and don't do it. So you need to make a decision that you want to be part of this. So let's say that there are very successful organizations that develop this. It is important that you develop it. It is very difficult. And I dare to say this with complete confidence. If an organization is successful in terms of training individuals, it is very likely that it will be successful as an organization. If an organization does not develop its individual training, it may not be successful. So it's important that you keep this in mind. And well, there's a very important mindset topic here that is part of the introduction to our course. Our course, as I mentioned, will have 5 sessions, but I want to emphasize this part a lot. And there's an interesting point. Organizations grow and develop somewhat according to the mindset of the founders. So there are the people who manage it. So there are organizations that always remain small and never develop. And why is that? Why are there organizations that, despite the great need in the world, whose mission is to change society and society's strong desire for that to happen, why are there reasons that they never manage to develop? Because they don't have money. But why don't they have money? It's something that's tied to the issue. It's not because they don't get donations. It's because the teams and the foundations usually lack the mindset, ambition, desire, or initiative. You put in the effort to get that money, right? And so there are several patterns that have been found over time that are all very realistic. First, they don't believe in the individual channel because that's what happens all over Latin America. Well, look, a businessman talks to me, he gives me some money, and that's easier. And it gives me less work than developing the divided channel. Okay, yes, but you're missing out on a great opportunity, not just for money, but for support your organization. An opportunity that will give you much more stability in the medium and long term than the businessman who gives you a donation today and doesn't know if he will give it to you again in the future. So it's very important to understand that this channel is the most important one for your organization to thrive in the future. It's not the big donations that come from us or other sources. You have to combine both things, and this is the strategy that really gives you financial stability because it allows you not to depend on grants that can sometimes fall through, and that has happened. Second, there is no alignment between the organization's leadership and the fundraisers or the teams that do the field work. There must be awareness at the management level, starting with the board, executive directors, councils, etc., management, that this is important. If there is no fundraising spirit in the organization, if there is no fundraising mentality in the organization, start at the top, because nothing will be more difficult because you not only have to move, the ability to get while moving the people inside. Fundraising is easier when the organization is aligned, seeing it as an investment and essential for development. A common issue is fundraising due to financial problems. Individual channels bring money, but are more beneficial long-term as the donor base grows, providing significant income and easing finances. Then there is another important problem, and that is that you always see this. I have seen it a lot in my life. It is like a pattern that I love almost all the time. And it is that I need to do this because I have financial problems. If the individual channel brings money, especially in the medium or long term, as your donor base grows, it can ease finances with a steady income. However, in the short term, forcing individual fundraising can be slow to generate significant amounts, as it depends on your community size. A large community means more money, a small one means less. When you have a big issue short term and try to force fundraising, you see it takes time to generate money based on community size. Large community, more money. Small community, less. People quit thinking they need immediate solutions and keep delaying. Delaying means never developing your channel. If your community is big, then your money is a lot. If your community is small, your money is small. So there are people who give up on it because they say, oh no, I need to solve my problems right now and I'm never going to start this. And they always postpone it and they keep postponing it. The consequence of postponing it is that you never manage to develop your individual channel properly. So this doesn't work on its own, right? Let's take the example of the car dealership again. If I put the cars out there, I receive them. But if I don't have a salesperson, I don't do marketing, I don't promote to get people to come to me, I don't seek partnerships, I don't look for a pitch, I don't look for benefits, I don't do the things I need to do, then I won't sell any cars. And it's exactly the same in fundraising. One of the biggest frustrations is that people think that just putting a donation button on the website is enough for people to donate, and that's not true, right? No one. And you should do this exercise with your own conscience, okay? Or it happens, but it's very rare, and it's like, I wake up today to see who I can get to donate. No, people don't do that. You have to go and find the donor, convince him, persuade him, sensitize him, explain to him why your cause is important, the need that exists. If you don't seek out the donor isn't just going to come to you on their own. So don't expect that the donation button works as a standalone exercise. It's a result of the effort you put into marketing. So if you don't put in the effort with these kinds of strategies, results aren't going to come. You have to put in the effort. And it's important that this is understood. If you put a dollar button on your website and expect that to work, it's not going to happen, plain and simple. So it's important to be clear about this. It's a push exercise. I'm going after my donors. Then something important is that you need to invest in this, the fundraising exercise. We will see this later when we see other capsules, etc., etc. Fundraising is a financial exercise. I invest 1, I recover 3 later, or 4 or 5. I create a long-term income base that is very profitable, but it doesn't happen without effort. So one of the most common mistakes, especially among directors and boards, is thinking that the poor fundraiser can do it all by themselves. They are capable. Fundraisers need fuel, they need resources, they need to be able to invest, they need to be able to test, they need to be able to try, they need to be able to make mistakes, lose investments if you want to see it that way, until they learn what works best for them. Once they learn, they dedicate themselves to scaling those donor communities in meaningful ways. When there are no resources, because there are organizations that do not have resources to invest, if you tell the organization, hey, let's spend some money on advertising for a campaign, and suddenly those resources physically don't exist, those resources need to be replaced with time or effort from people on the team. When you don't have money for advertising, you have to work harder, but you have to work. So resources are a must for this to work. If you don't invest resources in a process, nothing is going to happen. And remember, resources are either money or time. When I talk about time, I mean a lot of effort. We're talking about people taking initiative to support a social cause, not about people just operating a bureaucratic organization. So it's important that this exists. And here's something very important. If things don't work out, it's not because of a platform. It's not because of the advisor who's here providing resources. It's really because the organization didn't apply the necessary resources for things to function. That's why it's so important that an organization is aligned from the board down to those who execute things so that things actually happen. Otherwise, they just won't happen in any way. And it's very important that this is understood. So, well, say I've made that introduction. There is something very important, and that is that fundraising works depending on the determination that you as a fundraiser put into a cause. If you as a fundraiser make a huge effort to make things happen, then things will happen. If you as a fundraiser don't make a huge effort to make things happen, then the fundraiser isn't just someone who follows orders. They're a true social entrepreneur, someone who gets up every day saying, okay, how can I increase things today? What activities are you not going to invent? And they don't give up in the face of any obstacle. They are true entrepreneurs. So that's the big difference between successful organizations, right? It's about who is making the fundraising strategy. I used to hear a lot of, oh no, it's difficult. Oh no, it can't be done. Oh no, I don't know what to do. It has nothing to do with the oh no's. It has to do with what my attitude and spirit are towards a resource strategy. If you expect resources to come on their own, they won't come. Nobody offers that, okay? And it's very important to keep technology in mind. We are in a super technological world where, well, there are many advanced things these days. Without technology, you can't make this happen. I'll explain why later, but it's very important that you have the right technology to do it because otherwise it won't work. And that's also one of the things you need to keep in mind in this process. Finally, you should seek a balance between institutional fundraising and individual fundraising. I've never said not to do institutional fundraising. What I've said is that they are different strategies that should be handled by these teams, but the greatest balance in organizations comes when you find that balance. What does that balance look like? You can make it so that the organizations have at least 50% of their income coming from individuals. That income from individuals should aim for a very good portion, the majority of it, to come from recurring donors. It doesn't happen that way. There are people who make one-time donations, but you need to work to make that happen. And the other part comes from traditional sources, companies that donate to me, governments that support me, international recovery, etc. But you need to aim for a long-term goal where at least 50% of your fundraising comes from these sources, okay? So when that hasn't happened, big crises come along, like tax reforms, government cuts, economic crises like COVID, and the recession we're entering. They're talking about entering a recession, and if you don't have individual relationships, this can happen to you. Your organization could disappear for relying solely on a strategy of individual relationships. So what will ensure that your organization survives in the long term is that you focus on development. And remember that what will determine whether you are successful or not is your attitude, your entrepreneurial ability, your entrepreneurial spirit. If there is no entrepreneurial spirit, you won't be able to develop your organization the way it should be. So it's very important for you to keep that in mind, the mindset or attitude that will determine whether your organization succeeds or it will be your fault if the organization fails. Why is it your fault? Because you lacked energy, you lacked effort, you lacked initiative, you lacked consistency. In other words, the secret to making this work really lies in the spirit of the fundraisers. Companies like us provide you with the technology, the methodology, the guidance, and even moral support to help make this happen. Without technology, you can't do it. You already have the technology, you already have a license, but if you don't put in the effort that it requires, then it won't happen either. And I emphasize this a lot because the organizations that shine the most do so because of their operations that fail and do not develop. They fail and do not develop for the same reason. So this is important. So, well, if you had a mirror and looked at yourself, you have to choose which version of yourself you want. The version of the front runner that will make your organization succeed, 2009, or the version of the fundraiser who, due to a lack of vision, resources, weight, time, or resilience, ends up failing. You have to choose how many of those versions you want, and it's important that you do. So to wrap up this first session, I want to emphasize that this really works. You have to choose how many of those versions you want, and it's important that you do. So to wrap up this first session, I want to emphasize that this really works. One of the things I often hear is that this doesn't work very well, that it only works for a few, that only UNICEF can do this. That's not true. There are many organizations that achieve it and they do it very well. So it's very important to keep this in mind. Okay, so let's go ahead and work on the cases. Next, the idea is to talk a bit about some examples that do work, and then in the following sessions, we'll get into the practical side to see how fundraising develops. For me, it was very important to make it clear that there are some prerequisites. And the main prerequisite is you as a fundraiser, the determination you put into it, and that you are a social entrepreneur. And well, there are some examples. So for example, there are thousands of organizations like UNICEF. that are systematically successful in every country. These are organizations that manage to deliver results. And it's not just because it's UNICEF or because their brand is strong or because they work with children, which is what I often hear. It's because at the level of fundraising implementation, they put in a lot of effort and they do it well. There are organizations like Greenpeace, for example, that are very good. Why mention this example? Because Greenpeace's initial fundraising is quite different. They succeed through a crucial active process, not just by seizing opportunities, but with dedicated people and collaboration with the International Committee of the Red Cross. This organization is successful, though not universally. In some places, fundraising struggles, and in others, it hasn't begun. Yet it exemplifies achieving results. Smaller local organizations, some Afro's clients, are also seeing notable success. This organization is interesting because it's successful. In some countries, fundraising doesn't go well, yet it's an example of an organization achieving its results. Now, smaller local organizations, some clients of Afro's, are achieving interesting results. The Element Bank in Colombia 2 years ago lacked a solid foundation and mature processes. It is successful. Now, there are smaller local organizations, some of which are Afro clients, not all of which are achieving very interesting results. The case of the Colombian Elements Bank is an organization that 2 years ago perhaps did not have a solid foundation. This did not develop a very mature process that makes many organizations come to it, because in some way it is an organization that we can consider successful. This is a super small organization run by 2 people. It's called Alimentar. It's a beautiful organization in Cartagena, one of the most wonderful organizations I've seen, with 2 incredible social entrepreneurs. This organization achieves incredible results through a lot of social entrepreneurship, a lot of effort, seeking alliances, seeking visibility, seeking influences, and has managed to build an incredible base of recurring arts that, well, is like an example of who is currently the great one to be successful. Organizations like this one are humanitarian organizations that work in many areas, again, promoting humanitarian work through the Catholic Church. I can't give you specific figures, but the numbers are public. You can look them up. However, the amount of money they raise is impressive because they have made a huge effort to position themselves as a brand, to highlight their work, their efforts, and their causes. And really, the amount of money they manage to raise is incredible. This is also a really beautiful relationship in Colombia. They have been very consistent. They started very small, but today they have developed a very interesting niche organization. This is a niche political organization that appeals to an audience whose interest is definitely religious topics, and they manage to raise a lot of money as well. This is a really beautiful organization, Mercy in Colombia. I mention it because at the beginning of this organization, there was a very strong entrepreneurial process that brought together artists with television channels and achieved exceptional results in fundraising. If you set your mind to it, you can definitely consider this. You have to commit to it. That's the most important point. Well, that's like the first session. I'll stop here. I really appreciate your time. We'll move on to the next chapter shortly, and we'll be with you in a bit. Thank you so much for attending. And remember that the goal of these sessions is to help you train in the fundraising process. The most important thing for me is that you believe this works and that you understand it depends on your effort. A hug. Thank you.